Welcome to The Debate.
It's good to be here.
So today we're dissecting a phenomenon that's quite literally strapped itself to the wrists of millions. We're talking about the fitness wearable market. I mean, this is a sector valued at around £42 billion right now, and it's projected to just skyrocket to $100 billion by 2030. It feels like we're witnessing a really fundamental shift in how we relate to our own bodies, moving from just, intuition to actual data.
Or, and I think this is more likely, we're witnessing the successful monetization of anxiety. We're looking at a line of devices that goes all the way back to mechanical pedometers in 1780 to modern sensors that claim they can detect atrial fibrillation. But the central question hasn't really changed. Do these things actually make us healthier? Are they essential medical tools, or are they just expensive, inaccurate generators of obsession?
Well, I'd frame the question a bit differently. Do these devices provide the actionable data we need to revolutionize preventative medicine? I think the evidence points to yes. I mean, in a world that is just drowning in sedentary lifestyles, these trackers are a vital bridge between feeling okay and, actually understanding our health. We're talking about democratizing medical data here.
And I see them as fundamentally flawed. They're basically broken speedometers, especially for the main reason people buy them, which is calorie counting and weight loss. They create psychological dependency, they invade our privacy, and, as the data shows, they often just fail to deliver on their biggest promises. You say democratizing data, I say distributing errors.
Let's not dismiss the potential so quickly, though. I mean, the first step to health is awareness, just knowing where you stand. There was a pretty significant study in the Journal of Medical Internet Research, the JO study, that focused on cancer survivors. Now, this is a high-stakes group where physical activity is just crucial for recovery. The study found that while uptake was relatively low, only about 29%, the impact on those who did use them was profound.
I have reviewed the ZOO study. It's optimistic, sure, but I have some serious reservations about the selection bias there.
But look at the results. The survivors who used trackers showed significantly higher levels of moderate to vigorous physical activity. They also reported better self-rated health. This isn't just a placebo effect. It's what Olive magazine called the action feedback loop. You do something, a brisk walk, you see the data confirm it, and that reinforces the behavior. It turns a vague feeling of I should move more into, real quantifiable progress. It gamifies survival.
Okay, I understand the appeal of a feedback loop, but for a feedback loop to be useful, the feedback has to be accurate. Otherwise, it's just noise. You call it the quantified self, but I'd argue it's becoming the misled self. If we look at the hard data on whether that feedback helps the general population lose weight, the picture is, well, it's bleak. Olive magazine highlighted a study from JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association, that is quite damning for this whole wearable solve obesity argument.
Damning implies they caused harm? Did they?
In a way, yeah. By hindering progress. They took 500 overweight individuals. Everyone was told to diet and exercise. Standard stuff. Half of them got trackers, half didn't. Over 18 months, the group without the trackers lost an average of 13 pounds. The group with the trackers, they only lost 8. So the technology didn't just fail to help, it actively correlated with worse outcomes.
That is a counterintuitive finding, I will admit. But weight loss is multifactorial. You can't just pin a 5-pound difference solely on a piece of plastic.
But you can pin it on the behavior that the plastic encourages. Why did they lose less weight? It's likely because they were relying on totally inaccurate data for calories in versus calories out. It's the license to eat effect. You look at your wrist, it says you burn 600 calories, so you eat a 500-calorie muffin thinking you're in a deficit. But you're not. A meta-analysis by Wellness Pulse found the accuracy for energy expenditure is abysmal. On average, these devices are only about 56% accurate for calories. Some, like Garmin, drop to around 48%.
I think we need to be careful not to throw the baby out with the bathwater here.
You'd never get to your destination on time. That is biologically hazardous information when you're trying to manage metabolic health.
I'm not convinced because that focuses too much on calorie counting, which, let's be honest, is practically impossible to track perfectly anyway. We've moved way past simple step counting into the realm of legitimate medical utility.
we need to look at how the hardware has evolved for cardiovascular health. For instance, in pediatric cardiology, a study by Hardin and colleagues in JMIR compared wearables like the CardioWatch and the Hexoskin Smart Shirt against the gold standard medical Holter monitor.
The Holter monitor? That's the box with all the wires and electrodes you wear for 24 hours?
Exactly. It's bulky, it's itchy, and kids absolutely hate it. And if a child hates a medical device, they just take it off, and then you get zero data. The Hardin study found that for heart rate monitoring, these consumer wearables got between 85 and 87% accuracy compared to that medical equipment. That is not a broken speedometer. That is a viable clinical tool. For children who despise the Holter monitor, this is a revolution.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that the accuracy is good enough even in that study. 85% sounds like a B+, but in data science, a 15% error rate is massive. Let's dig into this accuracy gap, specifically how these things work. You mentioned wellness pulse. It highlights a critical flaw in the technology itself, photoplethysmography, or PPG.
Right, so break that down for us. What is PPG?
Well, PPG is basically shining a green light into your skin to detect changes in blood volume as your heart beats. It relies on light absorption. The problem is that light has to get through the skin. Wellness Pulse noted that accuracy drops for people with higher melanin content, so darker skin tones. The pigment absorbs more of the green light, which reduces the signal quality. This raises a huge issue of reliability across different populations. The hardware itself struggles.
That is a known limitation of current optical sensors, though. Newer multi-spectrum sensors are starting to address it.
But it's not just skin tone. There's the movement paradox. In that pediatric study you just praised, the accuracy dropped significantly exactly when the user was most active. When bodily movement increased or when heart rate spiked, the correlation with the Holter monitor just plummeted. I mean, the irony is, these are fitness trackers. We buy them to track activity. Yet they're most accurate when we're just sitting on the couch. So when an athlete or a kid playing actually needs the data, the technology fails them because the sensor's moving around on the skin.
I admit that high-intensity motion introduces artifacts or signal noise, but let me frame it differently. You're looking for absolute precision in a consumer product, whereas the real value is often in the trend. Even if the absolute number isn't perfect during a sprint, the data is solid enough to spot trends in resting heart rate or heart rate variability, HRV, and those are powerful indicators of overall health.
But users treat these numbers as gospel, not as trends. If my watch says my HRV is low, I start to panic.
But consider the alternative. In that pediatric case, kids rated the smart shirts and wristbands a 3.8 out of 5 for comfort, compared to a miserable 2.6 for the Holter monitor. Compliance is everything in medicine. If a child rips off the Holter, you have nothing. With a wearable, you get 87% accurate data. I will take imperfect data over no data every single time. And what's more, a systematic review by Singh and others showed wearables had a 94.2% sensitivity for detecting atrial fibrillation. That is a life-threatening condition. That 94% saves lives.
Okay, I acknowledge the utility in detecting AFib. That is a specific, high-stakes medical application where the device is acting as a sentry. But let's be honest about the market. Most people buying these things are not cardiac patients. They are the worried well. They're healthy people looking for problems. And this brings us to a psychological condition that The Guardian has identified: orthosomnia.
Orthosomnia sounds like an orthopedic problem.
It's a sleep disorder induced by sleep tracking. It's an obsession with getting perfect sleep data, which, ironically, causes insomnia. The quest for a perfect sleep score keeps people awake. They wake up, they check their score, and if the device says they slept poorly, they actually feel worse. It's the nocebo effect, the opposite of placebo. Negative expectations create negative symptoms.
Is that the device's fault, though, or is it how we interpret the data?
The device is the authority figure here. The Guardian profiled a new mother of triplets named Layla Green. Now, any parent knows she was exhausted. Of course she was. But her watch would send her these notifications telling her she was tired or not recovered. She said it felt like she was being told off by her wrist, like a sleep failure. The data didn't help her. She already knew she was tired. It just added this layer of objective judgment to her exhaustion.
That's a compelling story, and the psychological burden is real. But let me offer a counterexample from the same source. Take Shuggy McKennis, the Sealy caller mentioned in The Guardian. He works these totally erratic hours, late nights, early mornings. For him, the data was a necessary reality check.
How so?
Well, he had a massive sleep debt that he was just ignoring. You know, we're very good at lying to ourselves, saying, I'm fine, I'll just push through. The tracker didn't create his sleep debt, it just revealed it. For people like him, that data is a lifeline that says, hey, you need to rest. It gives them permission to stop.
But does it give permission, or does it just create a dependency? This gets to the psychological impact and the issue of privacy. We are feeding huge amounts of intimate, biological data into these ecosystems. Olive Magazine noted that 35% of female health apps share that data with third parties. You're not just creating health metrics, you're creating a commodity for advertisers.
Look, data privacy is a regulation issue. It's a legal framework problem, not an argument against the utility of the hardware itself. We fix the laws, we don't ban the thermometer.
But the hardware relies on that ecosystem. And on dependency, think about the dopamine loop. You called it the action feedback loop earlier. I see it as a dopamine trap. The brain releases dopamine when you log numbers or close your rings. It's gamification. But dopamine sensitivity wears off. It's the novelty effect. Once the novelty fades, people just abandon the device.
Or they form a habit.
Or worse, their motivation vanishes if the battery dies. If you can't go for a run because your watch is dead, you're not healthy, you're dependent. The intrinsic motivation, running because it feels good, gets replaced by extrinsic motivation, running to feed an algorithm.
I see that risk, but we have to be pragmatic. In a world facing an obesity epidemic, gamification is one of the few tools we have that can actually compete with the dopamine hits from social media and junk food. The JMIR cancer study highlighted a digital divide. Younger, wealthier people use them more. To me, that means we need to improve access, not discard the tool. If it gets a cancer survivor off the couch for 6 months, that's a win.
But is it a functional tool long-term? Let's go back to the practical failures in that pediatric study you praised. You mentioned the Hexoskin shirt. To work, it needs conductive gel applied to the sensors. The study noted that accuracy dropped in the second 12-hour period. Do you know why?
I believe it was a contact issue, wasn't it?
Because the gel dried out, you have to reapply cold conductive gel to a child's chest every 12 hours? I mean, come on, that is not a consumer solution. That is a hassle. If a device needs that level of maintenance to work properly, it is not ready for the real world.
That's a fair critique of that specific smart shirt. It's early gen tech. However, the study also showed that despite the gel, the shirt correctly classified heart rhythms in 31 out of 36 cases. That's potential we shouldn't ignore. We're looking at spotting arrhythmias in a comfortable shirt instead of a wired box. Technology improves. The gel issue will be solved. The concept is sound.
But 5 out of 36 were unclassifiable because of noise. In a medical setting, most of the time is not good enough. If you miss an arrhythmia because the gel dried out, that is a failure.
And yet the alternative, the Holter, is often rejected entirely. A slightly noisy signal is infinitely better than no signal because the patient refused to wear the device. We can filter noise. We can't filter absence.
That's a pragmatic argument, I'll grant you. But it brings me back to the psychological cost of this slightly noisy data. Wellness Pulse cited a fascinating study where users were given deflated step counts. The device essentially lied to them.
And what was the result? Did they walk more?
They felt that activity was inadequate, but more disturbingly, their blood pressure actually rose. The device dictated their physiology. Their bodies physically reacted to the lie on the screen, not the reality of their movement. That is the danger here. We are giving these devices a power that can turn into a nocebo weapon.
That shows the power of the mind, certainly. But it also reinforces my point that we need these devices to be better, not gone. The JMIR study on cancer survivors showed a clear correlation with higher physical activity. We can't ignore that. We just need to close the accuracy gap so the feedback loop is truthful.
Correlation, as we know, isn't causation. It's entirely possible that people who are already motivated are the ones buying the trackers. The tracker is a symptom of motivation, not the cause.
The study controlled for socio-demographic factors, and while we can debate the chicken and the egg, the fact is the technology helps us identify high-risk groups who are on the wrong side of that digital divide and could benefit most from this monitoring. If we can get a cheap, accurate tracker onto the wrist of a cardiac patient in a rural area, we extend the reach of the hospital.
I just come at it from a different angle. I think giving a piece of plastic that gives 56% accurate calorie counts to a low-income patient isn't solving a health issue. It's selling them a false sense of control. It's a distraction from things that actually work, like access to fresh food.
We're clearly at a philosophical crossroads here.
Indeed. So let me summarize. I see these wearables as useful only for very specific, high-level diagnostics, like AFib detection. But for general lifestyle tracking for the millions of worried well, they're detrimental. They rely on the calorie lie. They fuel orthosomnia, letting an algorithm tell us how to feel. If a device requires conductive gel or makes you anxious, it's not a solution. Listening to your own body is often far more accurate than a flawed sensor.
And I'll maintain that while calorie counting is flawed, the behavior modification aspect is powerful. We are shifting from feeling to knowing. And even if that knowledge isn't perfect, it's actionable. We are replacing cumbersome medical equipment for children and cancer survivors. The data shows they prefer these devices, and it shows they can save lives. The future lies in better algorithms and better interpretation, not in abandoning the data just because it has nuance.
I suppose we'll see if that 100 billion pound projection holds true, or if these all end up in a drawer with old iPods.
Indeed. It's worth reflecting that these devices are tools, not masters. As Da Vinci said, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. Perhaps the goal is to use this sophisticated tech to simply understand ourselves better without becoming enslaved by the numbers.
Or perhaps the real simplicity is realizing you don't need a device to tell you you're tired.
That is a decision for our listeners to make. Thank you for joining us on the debate.